the skills I think that translate well are, the leadership, and, because you're thrust leadership responsibilities at a very young age before you're even ready. And so, you develop those people skills and those leadership skills a lot sooner.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo. Unfortunately, my co-host was not able to make it today, but we're really excited about our guest today, Jay Tanjuan, with Director of Development with Scannell Properties. We've had a chance to go back and forth a little bit offline. I'm really excited to kind of dive into his backstory and learn a lot more about his background. So, Jay, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Raphael. This is great. I really appreciate you having me, and appreciate the spending time to get to know me a little bit, and also, get to know you as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to dive into your backstory because it is pretty interesting. So we'll go ahead and do that. So one of the things that we typically like to ask our guests when we first get started is to learn a little bit more about them. So if you don't mind kind of sharing your backstory, I think that'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. I was, born and raised San Diego, California. Had a really good, childhood. I was only child, and when you kind of grow up like that, you're kind of the sole focus of the parents, and there's no, kind of brothers and sisters to mess around with, or, so, growing up, and, I just got used to talking to adults a lot, because that's all I had, and then obviously once I got into school and, started to, make my own friends and whatnot. But I think, it's to some extent, it kind of helps you maybe later in your career when you can have those, types of adult conversations, or when you need to. And yeah, so it's been, it was a good childhood. Loved growing up in San Diego. But I think, as I was getting through high school, I always felt like I just wanted to do something different and blaze my own trail kind of thing. And I just wanted to move away, so I went as far as I could. Basically, I went to college on the other side of the country, went to the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. So, and that would eventually take me kind of all over the world, just from doing deployments and all that stuff while I was in the Navy. But yeah, so it's just a really great, childhood, as I mentioned. Growing up, went off to the Naval Academy for college. I had the opportunity to run track there, so that was a very fun experience for me, and just glad it all kind of worked out, because you never really know kind of how the path that life kind of takes you. Because when I was maybe a junior or senior in high school, I was still like, I didn't think that the Naval Academy was where I was going to go. I did this summer seminar program over the summer, I think between my junior and senior year. And I remember leaving that just thinking, I don't think I'm going to go here. It's just not, I don't want to be in the military afterwards. But it's funny, just how life kind of takes you down that different paths that you don't expect. And I just kind of prayed about it a lot, and it's just, wow, this is where it started to make sense and started to feel right. And okay, so I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do the harder decision. And you hear some of my friends, they're going out to these really great party schools by the beach, and from San Diego. So, there's big San Diego State contingent and a lot of my friends ended up going there. So, that's such a fun place to go to college, I'm sure. Go Aztecs, by the way. They just made it to the championship game, which I had the opportunity to go out to in Houston this past month. So that was awesome. Just growing up, being a fan of them, because we don't have any professional sports teams in San Diego other than the Padres now. So they're kind of our team. But I'm digressing a little bit, but I just wanted to share that. So yeah, so I just wanted to choose something different, and I felt like, oh, this is going to be hard, but I'm feel really compelled to do it. So and that's what I did. So I just ended up at the Naval Academy, and I wasn't necessarily recruited as a track athlete. I got in already from an academics and extracurricular standpoint, but after I already got accepted, I was basically invited as a preferred walk-on for the track team. And the Naval Academy is unique, right? Where everybody who goes there is basically on scholarship. Room and board is all covered. But in this particular case, when we're talking about sports, I wasn't necessarily defined as a recruited athlete and just as a preferred walk-on. So they would say, hey, you're invited to, once we have tryouts and stuff, you can come out, and that was it. So as luck would have it, I was a high hurdler in high school, and that's what I continued at the Naval Academy. But they just didn't have a lot of hurdlers at that point, that for whatever reason, like the track team is huge, so you have all these different events, and so sometimes you get really deep in distance running, for example. You get a lot of recruits particular year, and they develop at the school, and you get really deep in certain areas. But when my freshman year, they just never really had a deep hurdling department, I guess. So luckily for me, that kind of opened the door and allowed me to get in there and letter as a freshman, and then I just kept getting better each year. So track was such a big part of I think the Naval Academy experience. And it's obviously we had the military side of things, which they were basically indoctrinating us into the military way of life, because everybody, for the most part, there were some folks that had served in the military before, prior enlisted. But for the most part, it's a lot of 18-year-old high school students who had very little exposure to the military way of life. So the Naval Academy, make sure that what the military is all about. So we had those requirements, we had academic requirements, and then you throw in the track component on top of it. So it was a lot to adjust to that first year, and just being away from home and being on the other side of the country. And we had a lot of restrictions in terms of social life and all that, especially your first year. So it's just just a big adjustment, going through all that, and then through my senior year, and then finally graduated and was off to the military. So I served as a supply officer for 6 years after my time at the academy. And again, I really got that opportunity to be in as a supply officer, because I'm colorblind. So and I mentioned earlier just about how crazy life is, and I was able to somehow get in and pass the required tests getting into the academy. But once they tested me while I was there, I wasn't able to pass those tests, those same colorblind type tests. So I got put into the supply corps and had that opportunity to do that, which was really a great experience for me, because that was basically logistics and supply chain management. And then fast forward to where I am now, I didn't think I'd be doing logistics and supply chain type real estate, right? So again, just an example, just life taking you in interesting paths that you wouldn't really have necessarily set out for yourself. And so all of that kind of, being in the Navy and, really, I didn't know what I was going to do. I kind of came to a crossroads in terms of, do I stay in or do I get out of the Navy? So I ultimately ended up deciding, to get out after 6 years. I now was stationed in San Diego, which is where I'm from. I met my girlfriend, now wife, at that time when I was stationed in San Diego. So it just kind of all made sense in terms of like, where I wanted to start building a family and growing some roots. Because if I continued down the military lifestyle, I would likely have had to move again and move multiple times. And I've seen, I mean, the what it takes, like with having a family and a young family, it's hard for those sailors and Marines and soldiers that have to do that. Go on deployment, and you're basically leaving, your family and your young family at home, and so life goes on. So the wife or husband, whoever's kind of running the household at that point, they're having to do all that and basically be a single parent while the service member's on deployment. So I saw that, and I just wasn't sure if that's what I exactly wanted for my future family at that point. So, and I wanted to stay in Southern California because once I got the taste of coming back, I didn't want to have to leave anymore. So, so after the Navy, I decided I'm gonna get out and gonna explore commercial real estate. And so I got my MBA at UC Irvine, and that decision even then was to focus on schools in Southern California with some real estate a school or real estate center that would be beneficial for me and help me take that next step in my career and figure things out. And when you're in the MBA program, your interests change. You figured this is something that sounds interesting, but then you take some courses in another subject and it leads you down another path. So I just ended up staying in real estate. I kind of went into business school thinking that's what I wanted to do, and that's where I ended up staying. I did some internships, I met with a lot of people, and it was great. So and then fast forward to graduation in 2009 from business school. I mean, that's right at the Great Recession, so there were a lot of opportunities, right? So I was fortunate enough to find opportunity to do an office tenant rep brokerage with JLL. So again, I wouldn't have kind of picked that path if there wasn't, the current, or not the current, but the then economic conditions and environment of the Great Recession. But I was so fortunate, I think, to have had that experience in brokerage and to just really learn the basics of sales and real estate, and cold calling and understanding marketing and presentation, and just refining kind of these really soft skills that I still use today. I mean, I'm on the phone constantly. I'm talking to brokers, I'm talking to LP capital partners, and just always selling, right? You're always selling either yourself, your company, your deal, so there's those skills in brokerage, I think, were a really good foundation that, as I mentioned, I don't think I would have pursued post MBA, because that's not really the traditional post MBA path that you take. So, so that's kind of what happened then in terms of after graduation. And then a couple years into it, I had an opportunity to join Panettone Development, and it was just kind of a situation where one of the former partners that I met with while I was in business school at UC Irvine, it was still, they're going, like everyone during that time in real estate are going through tough times. But once the market started to show some signs of improvement back in 2011, basically got picked up to join Panattoni. And I didn't know anything about industrial. I was an office tenant rep, so I didn't have a construction background. I didn't know, where the Inland Empire was, which, most people in our industry know that that's really the heart of the logistics, area for the country, really, Southern California and especially the Inland Empire. So I didn't know anything about it. And just over time, I was there at Panattoni for almost 11 years. So over time, I just started to pick up more and more skills, and I learned from the best. They have a really great, just business and model, and the leadership there is really great. And, so I was able to learn a lot. And over that almost 11-year period, I, felt like I picked up the skills I needed to eventually say, yes, I can do this, somewhat on my own and start an office from scratch, So, I was employee number one for the new SoCal office for Scannell Properties in January of 2022. So it was really a great run up from when I started at Panattoni 2011 to, it was May 2011 to January of 22, basically. So, if anyone that was in real estate during those years obviously knows kind of what happened, and then anyone in industrial, and especially Southern California industrial, really saw what happened that no one could have predicted. I mean, I wish I could say that I totally planned this out and I knew that e-commerce was going to explode the way it did, but I had no idea. Starting in 2011, I didn't even know what industrial really was and how impactful it was. So it's just, again, I keep coming back to this, but just life kind of taking you in paths that you didn't really expect. And sometimes it's where you think that, oh, I want something to happen this way, and then it doesn't happen that way, and you're disappointed initially, but then you let it play out, and then it's amazing, right? So it turns out even better than you could have even imagined sometimes. So that's kind of the exciting piece of it too. I mean, just the unknown, and sometimes your expectations get you all kind of wound up, but if you just give it some time and let it really play out, there could be some better times ahead.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. And, you kind of alluded to that with, the various different, movements you had throughout your career. Obviously, well, first off, thank you for your service. That's amazing. My dad was in the military, in the Air Force. And so I was actually born just off Aviano Air Base in Northeast Italy.
Oh, nice.
So I know the relocation is real. I mean, we
moved
3 or 4 times before I was 14. So, a lot of movement, but it's a very unique experience. Obviously, you get to see a lot of places around the world. You get to interact with people from all different types of backgrounds, and I feel like that's invaluable in our career. And that we obviously, our business is all relationship driven. So being able to build those connections with people from diverse backgrounds, and understanding that we as people are not that much different, regardless of where we're at in the world, is very unique, is a very valuable insight to have. And you kind of alluded to the fact that, obviously going from the military, now going out into the private sector, and, kind of realizing that you wanted to pursue a commercial real estate career. You just didn't know how it was going to happen. I mean, it's almost, I always allude to the fact that it's like the world works out in certain ways. Like, I don't know if it's divinely inspired or whatever else, but there's something going on to where it is, because I've had similar experiences in my life where, I'm like disappointed because I missed out on an opportunity, or maybe something happened that, I wasn't planning for. And then all of a sudden a new opportunity presents itself that's just as good, if not better. And so, I don't know what that is, but, I can definitely relate to that in my own life as well. But one thing I'm really curious about is, obviously we touched on your background. We learned a little bit more about, you as a person and your thought process as you started evolving to these different nodes within your career. Why, I guess, as far as your decision to kind of branch off from the office tenant side over to the industrial side, was there a reason for it, or was it more so that it was a very unique opportunity and it just so happened that, industrial is what they did? The Panattoni, I believe you had mentioned.
Right. Yeah. There was no reason. I was really set on making office tenant rep brokerage my career, and I was, already setting myself up that way, and my mindset that was the way it was going to happen. I think, coming out of business school, I had kind of dreams that, okay, I'm going to be a developer, because that's what I think a lot of people initially, when they get into commercial real estate, they probably think, oh, I'm going to be a developer. I'm going to build buildings and do all that stuff. But there's so many different avenues that you could take once you're in the industry. And so I really love brokerage. I really love the kind of eat what you kill kind of mentality, and waking up when you just don't know kind of where the next meal is going to come from, right? Because you have to go out and get it, right? So that was really intriguing to me, and really, because you're basically running your own business, because you have to have the discipline to make your cold calls and to put in the work each day, and really trust the process, because you don't see results right away. So you just really had to go through that, and I really appreciated that experience. And so I was in year 2, so in brokerage, so I was already starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I was ready to make some more deals. And just an opportunity kind of just really came out of the blue, for Panattoni and doing industrial development. So there was no plan, I was not prepared to think like, okay, I'm just going to do brokerage for a few years and then go to opportunity to go into development. That was not at all in my thought process. It just, as luck would have it, the opportunity came up, and in fact, I turned it down at first, because I was like, hey, I'm good. I met with the former partner at Panattoni, and he said, hey, we just did this $1 billion joint venture with Cal Stirs in 2011. We're going to need to add some folks right now. And I said, oh no, this sounds really intriguing, but I'm really good at where I'm at. I'm as JLL doing office tenant rep brokerage in Orange County, and that's kind of what I was going to do. And I can probably refer you to a couple of my friends that might be interested. So I kind of just left it at that. And then a couple of weeks later, that former partner came back and just was like, hey, it's basically yours if you want it, so let me know. And then at that point I was like, okay, well, let me think about it a little bit more. So I consulted with some of my mentors in the industry, and and I think that's really what opened up my eyes and said, okay, time out. Let's really figure this out. So I started doing some research on my own, like, what is industrial, and how is that gonna have an impact, or what's gonna happen with industrial over the next several years, trying to just understand all that and try to educate myself. And industrial, I think, like multifamily, is just seems very intuitive, right? So for multifamily, everybody has to live somewhere, right? So not everyone can be in a single family home and own it. So multifamily makes sense. And then for industrial, it just made sense because everything's coming in through the ports of LA and Long Beach. I believe 40% of the goods coming into the US come in through those two ports. And they have the largest ports by volume. They're the largest ports by volume in the U.S. by far, especially when you combine the two. because they're right next to each other. So understanding that, and then all these goods are coming in, so they all have to be stored somewhere. So, so naturally they have to be stored in warehouses. And where are they going to be stored? They're going to be stored in Southern California warehouses. So that's really how the IE, the Inland Empire, which is just east of Los Angeles and Orange County, really grew into the market it is today. LA is about 1 billion square feet of industrial. Orange County's 260 million, and the IE Inland Empire is 600 million. So it's grown a lot in just the last decade, really, since I started in the business. So it used to be more of a release valve for LA and Orange County, because LA and Orange County are all built out. So and there was land available in the Inland Empire. Now that's not so much the case because it's grown so much. The Inland Empire, especially the Inland Empire West, is really an infill market right now. And even to some extent, the Inland Empire East, because there's been so much development in logistics the last several years. So
definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And like multifamily, I mean, industrial has been on a tear for quite a few years, and I believe it's going to continue to improve and continue to grow. And obviously one of the major beneficiaries is going to be a significant, the number one market primarily for this product type, which is obviously the Inland Empire and LA metro as a whole. So obviously, appreciative of the insights you shared on that front. So one thing I'm curious about is, obviously you come from a military background. There's probably a lot of vets that listen to this podcast, and some are maybe even considering a career in commercial real estate. What are some of the, I guess, lessons and experiences that you've had through your military service that couldn't be applied to a career in commercial real estate? And obviously you've had, experiences on the brokerage front. Now you're managing projects on the development front. Like what type of, what would you say to those individuals?
So in terms of just advice and how to get into the
advice
real estate, or
well, starting off, like, what skills translate? Because I feel like that's sometimes what happens when I talk to people, not necessarily that are vets, but just people in general that don't necessarily have a real estate background. They say, well, maybe I don't know how my skills are going to apply to a career in this particular space, when in reality, you can draw, lessons and the skill sets you develop in other professions can be applied to.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of curious if you could share insights on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing, because it's, finding that next career move is I think is obviously the most difficult for military folks, because there's not a lot of jobs out there that can really replicate what you did in the military. It's just not the same, and I kind of liken it to the professional athletes, right? Like, because they're playing a specific sport, and then there's nothing in the kind of civilian world or the real world that will replicate like a roaring crowd of 100,000 people chanting your name. Right? There's never going to be anything like that. So I think that's always a struggle, and military is included in that as well. I wasn't a Navy SEAL or anything like that at all, but just reading a lot about kind of some of the things that Navy SEALs do, and so there's SEAL Team 6, right? They went in and they killed Osama bin Laden, right? So how professionally is there anything that that can replicate that experience or that level of experience that these folks had? So I mean, that's always the challenge, so there's the skills I think that translate well, or the leadership, and because you're thrust leadership responsibilities at a very young age, before you're even ready, and so you develop those people skills and those leadership skills a lot sooner, because I think if if someone who, let's say, they started out in brokerage right out of high school, I mean not high school, right out of college, they're the lowest rung on the ladder, so they have no leadership responsibilities. And so you're not really picking up those leadership skills until you're more senior and you have more a book of business. And now they say, okay, you've been successful as a broker, now you can hire your own team and build your own team. So it's much later in your career when you're picking up those leadership skills. Whereas in the military, we have those skill set, or we have that skill set, I think, much earlier in our career, and we practice it, because anything, like the more you do something, the better you can get, right? So if you're doing it much earlier in your career and you're starting, leadership type of roles and that sort of thing, so you can get better at that really, really quickly, and then it translates really well, I think, to the civilian side of things when there is a need, I think, for good, strong leadership within companies and that sort of thing. So I think that part of it translates really well. The people skills in terms of just understanding people, because in the military, I mean, we deal with folks from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, all ages, and you have to figure out how to come together and find common ground to achieve a certain goal. And there's a lot of folks that I probably would not have interacted with in outside world, but because we're forced into these tight quarters and tight situation on a ship, on my ship in particular, there's only 400 people. And when you're on deployment for 6 months, this is who this is all you have, right? So you get to know a lot of people really well, probably a lot more than you'd like. But at the end of the day, a lot of these folks have become, my friends that I still contact now. And, I just texted one of my friends from the Navy this morning, so that we've known, for 20 years. Right. So, it's really unique in that sense, where you form some really tight bonds. And I think that really translates well, to the civilian side. And again, it's hard to replicate those types of bonds into, the civilian side of things, because, there's nothing that can replicate going somewhere with your office team for 6 months without your family and away from your family, and you're just together for 6 months working, long hours every day, and then, coming back and returning home, so there's nothing that can replicate that. But I think you can still, use those same skills in terms of leadership and just understanding people and dealing with people and different types of people. Those, I think, translate really, really well. And I think, there are firms that do appreciate that. Because, there's some firms, I think, that don't understand kind of what veterans can bring. And then there's others that really get it. I think once they have some vets in their business and kind of see what they can do, usually I'd like to think it's a pretty positive experience. Of course, there's always, kind of outliers, but I like to think, the military veterans have a lot to contribute, once they're out of the military.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing that, because, like I said, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that are listening to this that maybe are in a similar position, maybe that you were in when you got out of the military, and providing that context to them to say, look, you do have skills that are very valuable, and there are people out there, and the different employers or, different firms out there that do value that, and you can, cut your teeth underneath some of these companies. And if, let's say, down the road you want to start your own thing, you have the opportunity to do so. I mean, it's such a diverse and wide-ranging industry where you can literally dip your toes in so many different things.
Right.
And so, I appreciate you kind of sharing that. So, kind of back to where you're at today. Obviously, you guys are focusing on industrial development projects. What's the future of your role in the company, and then ultimately, what you want to see accomplished over the next several years.
Right. Yeah. And thanks for asking that. I mean, I think, when I started in January 22, the economic environment was very different, obviously from what it is today. I mean, in January 22, the debt was still cheap. Their rent growth in industrial, and especially in Southern California industrial, was still off the charts. I think we were looking at some data the other day. I believe it was CBRE information on the IE West rent growth year over year from quarter 2 2021 to quarter 2 2022. Rent growth in the IE West was 98.6%. So, when rent growth's that high, I mean, you can make any deal pencil, right? So
100%.
all the deals were looking great in the early part of 22. And then I think the Fed started to notice that inflation wasn't transitory, and it might be a little bit more stickier than they initially thought. So that's in March of 22, we started to see the first of, I believe, 10 interest rate hikes that they've done over the last 10 times they've met. So, I think that has greatly impacted our industry, where you're increasing the Fed is increasing the Fed funds rate, which in turn, just affects all the kind of lending and environment, and it's really thrown kind of the debt markets and capital markets kind of into a state of flux. So exit cap requirements started to push up, where now that resulted in higher yield requirements to take on the additional risk for development deals. So I'll just paint a picture. Like in January of 22, I mean, we were basically solving to high fours yield on cost on an untrended basis. So let's say it's 4.75. And so if we have 100 basis point spread on top of the exit cap rate at the time, which was 3.75, then the 4.75 untrended yield on costs going in makes sense. And again, debt was cheap, rent growth was through the roof, and buildings were leasing up super quickly. So you had no downtime. Once you had a building built, if it wasn't pre-leased or if it wasn't leased immediately after construction completion, people would ask, "What's wrong with your building?" So that was a very unique environment. The pandemic obviously really accelerated the implementation of e-commerce, and that that's really resulting in the supply chain crisis that we saw, and the need for more warehouse. So more warehouse space. So warehouse demand was really at an all-time high. And then as I mentioned, the interest rate and inflation started to really take hold. It really kind of slowed down the investment in business. So and as the Fed has continued to raise the Fed funds rate, I think it's also affected just how expensive debt has become. So when you're starting or trying to get a project out of the ground, now debt is so much more expensive. So construction financing today wasn't at all what it was before. Back in January 22, SOFR, which is kind of the rate that 1 month SOFR is kind of the rate that lenders use to determine kind of where their interest rate should be for construction lending. So SOFR, which was near zero plus 300 basis points. So you're kind of 3% or so on your construction loan. And then fast forward to today, SOFR is about 5%. And now the spreads are 350. I've seen 400 basis points. So now you're 8-9%. So you've tripled what your debt is for construction financing, and then rent growth isn't the same as what it was. The LP capital is really focused on an untrended uh, yield on cost now. Whereas when the market was so hot, they can justify using the trended yield on cost because the rent growth was there. So that was really just helping the market quite a bit. And so now things have changed, like I said. So we're looking now for 6 or 6.5 untrended yield on cost these days in our market in Southern California, which is considerably higher than where we were. Exit caps I mentioned earlier, was high 3s, so now it's north of a 5. So let's say we have a exit cap of a 5, and that's our assumption for our deal. Then 100 basis points on spread on top of that. So we're at a 6 or 6.25, 6.5 to untrended yield on cost. So that's how we can justify doing deals right now in this environment. But the problem is the land now is no longer worth what it was, or at least the buyers don't believe it's worth that because of this now added risk and perceived risk with the uncertainty that's happening in the current economic environment right now. So, but the sellers don't get that yet. So there's a very wide bid-ask spread right now between sellers and buyers. And that's why in our market, at least, and I think that it's also true for the rest of the country, you have seen very few industrial land transactions really starting, kind of late third quarter of 22 and to today. There's been very few of these, land transactions because there's still the expectations wise from sellers and buyers is still very wide. And I think further complicating things, a lot of the LP capital, which was very eager to get into Southern California industrial and take on entitlement risk and take on permit risk. LP capital really doesn't want to do that anymore, and they're looking they're just looking for shovel ready sites. So that means it's fully entitled and it's all the permits, and so it's permit ready. So that's a big shift, So now not only are you asking a seller to pay less, or that we're going to pay less for your site, in some cases, 15, 20, 30, even 40% less for their land, where people were telling in LA it was like $200 or higher. Now it's probably 115, 120, and maybe some pockets you get up to 130, to solve to that untrended yield on cost of a 6 or higher. So the higher you go, if it's a 6.5, then that land price is really the only thing that you can move. So the land price comes down lower. So that's why you're talking, that's why I mentioned, 115 or maybe even less in some cases. So you're having a lower land price, and then you're asking, hey, we need time now from the seller. We need time to entitle and get it permitted all before we close. So, you're really finding or trying to find that unique seller that has to sell in any market, whether it's, death, divorce, taxes, retirement, transition from the old generation to the new generation. There's, some real estate or some life event that's causing a need for a real estate event to happen. So whereas before, in 21 and 22, you just hit this magical number, this lottery number that the sellers wanted, and you get to that number, they're automatically a seller. Okay. Oh, yeah. So now that really doesn't exist. Now we're having to actually find the unique seller with the very unique situation that is willing and has a need to sell in any environment, because of some other extenuating circumstance that's almost forcing their hand to sell. Because, if if I was a broker in this environment, I'd tell, and the seller was my client, I'd probably say, yeah, it's probably not good time to sell right now. Let's kind of wait it out, as terms of advice.
Absolutely.
But there's always going to be sellers that need to sell, like I said. So that's what we're trying to find. We're trying to find these sellers that will do that, so we can, build our building, lease it, and sell it, because we're merchant builders. So our whole MO, we got to get in and out as quickly as possible, and use those funds to go on to the next deal, and do that as many times and as often as possible. And that's how we make our money, doing it like that. So
absolutely. No, I appreciate the feedback. And obviously, we do, as we're recording this, we are it's still in a very odd time. I mean, we've had a record run of increases as far as the Fed funds rate's concerned. Not necessarily to heights that we've seen in the past, but the rapidity, or how rapid the rates have increased, is really what's been kind of put the transaction flow on at almost a standstill. I'd be interested to see the total number of transactions year over year by the end of this year, how we compare to 2022. It's probably going to be significant, the drop off. So, I'm sure it's going to stay that way for quite some time. But obviously, I appreciate your insights on that front. And who knows? I mean, this year is looking like it's going to be a very tumultuous one, and potentially even next year as well. They say, I saw a webinar from the CCI Institute. I believe, I forgot the gentleman's name, but he's the head economist for them. And he was saying that, like, he had mentioned how there's something running on Twitter. It's like survive till 25 or something.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it'll make it that far, but hopefully, we can stabilize a little bit before then. But I appreciate the feedback that you provided on that front. So one of the things I like to ask all our guests, I'm a voracious reader. I know our co-host is a voracious reader as well. So I was wondering if you could share maybe one of the most impactful books that you've ever read. And it doesn't necessarily have to be real estate related, but we would appreciate if you could share it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love reading as well. And I kind of just got into it more later in my career. I wish I would have started sooner. I really started in earnest probably around 2018. So just starting really reading a lot of books. And I would just encourage anyone younger in the industry, just starting out, just read as much as you can. And, I love, the nonfiction kind of self-help books. I love the inspirational story, the comeback story. So I love all of that. But I think I would say, at least the most recently, the book that has made a big impact is Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And I think it's really helped me, just adjust my mindset and how I adjust to the complexities and different turns of life. I mentioned really briefly, like, I think before we were actually recording, I don't believe there's any coincidences, right? So that came from that book, because I think it's really the world puts you where or the universe kind of puts you where you're supposed to be. And, when I look back at my life and kind of see how everything plays out, there's, tough times, but, those tough times also make you kind of who you are. And you needed those tough times for whatever reason. And in the moment, they feel so overwhelming and very difficult. But, the Untethered Soul just talks about, just absorbing that moment and experiencing it, and just knowing that you're alive and you're, and it's going to be better. It doesn't stay like that. It never stays like that, So I think it was really impactful. I really enjoyed the book. It was, just kind of recommended to me, I think, by a friend. And, I kind of put it off because I do a lot of Audible, so I do audiobooks. So I do a little bit of reading, physical books, but a majority is all Audible, because it's very convenient, very easy when you're on a run, or you're doing kind of boring, mundane tasks at home, or, working out at the gym. It's easy, to have an audiobook on, and Audible makes it very easy to to accommodate my lifestyle and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, like I said, I mean, I think the Untethered Soul was really really impactful. And whenever anyone asks, that's usually, one, because it was very recent that I finished it, and two, it was just very impactful and very deep. I didn't expect it to be that deep. Like, sometimes, you read the self-help, self-development type books, and a lot of it's, very repetitive in terms of, you got to work hard and you got to grind and, all that stuff. But this one was just, a lot more deeper and made me think,
Yeah,
So
no, I appreciate that feedback, and we actually had Michael Beckerman from CRE Tech. It's a big commercial real estate technology event that's hosted in New York City. They have one in Copenhagen and various other places around the world, and he actually had that as a recommendation as well. So
oh yeah.
it's on my reading list.
Oh yeah, you got to do it.
Oh, I'm going to. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm similar to you. I'm a big Audible person. I have the credits that I get from, whatever subscription plan. So whenever I get a credit, I'm like, okay, let's listen to something. And,
Yeah.
some of the most impactful books, probably similar to you, that I've read have not been, business related or,
Mhm.
anything like that. So no, I appreciate you adding to that to the list. I'm definitely going to probably make that my next read. I got another credit.
Yeah,
Allocated,
good choice. Yeah, I'll look forward to hearing your feedback on it. Hope I didn't build it up too much, and you
No.
can actually
Well,
enjoy it.
absolutely. And I think, when you have enough people say that it's a good book, I feel like, they can't all be wrong, right? So
Right,
I feel
yeah.
So I appreciate that. No.
Yeah.
So, well, first off, thanks so much for your time. I know you've been busy, and I'm glad we were able to get this on the books and actually, I was get to learn a little bit more about your backstory. One of the things we like to do near the end of our podcast episode is we like our guests to contribute something to what we call the commercial real estate treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience. And, our previous guests have contributed like helpful PDFs, spreadsheets, books, really anything they think would be of value to the audience. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to share what you're willing to contribute today.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's actually very, very timely, because I think last time we spoke, there was a California bill that was being proposed at the time and going through the legislative process to attempt to get approved. It ultimately got shot down last year. It was called AB 2840, and basically that bill says, for the entire state of California, if you were within 1,000 feet, a warehouse distribution building was within 1,000 feet of a sensitive receptor, which are basically defined as, churches, residential, schools, parks, that would not be allowed statewide. So last year it was defeated, and then it came back again in another form called AB 1000, and with the same kind of description in terms of what they were trying to achieve and get approved. But luckily it got shot down again, even earlier than in the process than last year. So I think was a big win for our industry, especially in the state of California. Because, I think we are seeing that pop up a lot about, just the not in my backyard. We don't want warehouse industrial, in our neighborhoods. But at the same time, when you look at the Inland Empire and how much it has grown, from a logistics industry, how much has grown, but there's been countless ancillary benefits because of the logistics industry. So it has brought plenty of jobs and other areas within commercial real estate, like retail has popped up, multifamily, the need, the more housing has the values of homes have increased. So the overall, economy of the Inland Empire has really greatly benefited from, the logistics industry and logistics real estate. So I'd like to share just some of our kind of flyers and brochures from NAIOP, just touting, what the logistics industry brings to communities. And I think this particular one is focused, it's put out by NAIOP Inland Empire. And it really focuses on the local Inland Empire community, but I think it can be applied to a lot of the communities all around the country. And there's also additional studies that show, in terms of environmental impact, how California itself has already kind of taken a lead on ensuring that these warehouses that are being built are adhering to very strict environmental standards as outlined by CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. So all of these things and the studies that have shown in some of these items that I'll share with your audience is that there's science actually behind and supporting the logistics industry and what we're doing that refute a lot of the claims that we believe are baseless in terms of from an environmental standpoint that are really putting negative information and incorrect information, we believe, based on science, right? So definitely. It's I think that's going to be eye-opening for some who may not be aware of some of the benefits and the impact that our industry in industrial is having to communities, and really uplifting communities and allowing them to really thrive and grow. Because one thing I saw recently was the Inland Empire in particular. You've heard a lot, California, a lot of people are moving out, and they're going to other states for a variety of reasons. But in the Inland Empire, there's actually projected growth, and you can't say that's not because of the logistics industry. So I think the Inland Empire has a lot of benefits, and it's a great place to work and live. And I think the logistics industry is a big part of that.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And it is an integral part of that area, and obviously it's a huge economic driver for the area. So understanding that by enabling businesses to operate in your state, it's a benefit. So right. You don't want to continually thrash at business over and over and over, and then because that could potentially cause opportunity to dry up, and you definitely don't want that to be the case. And as you mentioned, it seems like people are taking the requisite steps to ensure that from an environmental standpoint and from all the regulatory standpoints that all the newer builds comply with them.
Exactly.
So obviously it's a benefit. So I appreciate you sharing that. We'll go ahead and include that in the commercial real estate treasure chest as well, so you guys can gain access to that. So again, Jay, thank you so much for your time. We do greatly appreciate it. If people wanted to learn more about you or maybe get in touch, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, I think I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's I think the easiest, and I can easy search. I think I'm the only Jay Tanjuan on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's easy to find me, and just reach out that way, and happy to answer questions or anything like that.
Definitely. Well, Jay, again, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and include that in the show notes. If you guys listen to this in a podcast format, it'll be in the description. Or if you guys are watching this on YouTube, again, his contact information will be in the description as well. So again, Jay, thank you so much. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review. It's made a huge impact in our ability to reach a broader audience, and we've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It does make a huge impact in our ability to meet what the requirements are for the YouTube algorithm, so that they continue to spread the message, and we make sure that more and more people are educated about the commercial real estate industry. So thanks again so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.